Now we're going to talk about the descent strategy. This is basically your plan on making it back to your landing area from where you exit the airplane. Okay, so I know there's a lot going on in this photo, but let's start by checking the wind direction. In general, we have winds coming out of the south at about 10 miles an hour. That helps us kind of lay out the rest of our descent strategy. Early in the progression of getting your license, and even after you get your license, you'll work with your instructors, other jumpers, and the pilot to help determine the best exit point above the ground. And that'll be the red box that you see at the bottom. After you exit the airplane, you will have some drift in free fall. This will depend on how high you're jumping from and other factors that we'll talk about later. You get less drift jumping from lower altitudes than from higher altitudes where you have more time in free fall. The free fall drift that you get will hopefully bring you over the area that we call the opening point that we've tried to calculate and estimate before we take off. During the opening of your parachute, you can still get some drift while it's opening, and the goal is for that drift to start taking you toward the playground area. We've already covered a lot of information about the playground area and how to get into your landing pattern, so if you need to go back to Section A and review that, now's a good time. Now we're going to talk about a concept called halfway down, halfway there. This is a way for you to help decide if you can make it back to your landing area, or really to any area that you're aiming for. So first, looking down at our feet, we can see that we're directly over the X, which is at the south end of the runway. We're at 3,000 feet, and we're trying to decide if we can make it to the green circle, which is our entry point for the landing pattern. So what we're going to do is we're going to mentally divide the distance in half. We can see that we're over the X. We can see the green circle, which will be our entry point for the downwind. Then we're going to mentally divide that distance in half, somewhere at about where that green bar is in the middle. So again, starting at 3,000 feet above the X, if we get to the halfway point and we're down to 2,000 feet, that means we lost roughly 1,000 feet of altitude. That gives us a pretty good idea that we can make it back to the landing pattern entry point by roughly 1,000 feet. Now, if we get to an altitude of 2,000 feet before we reach the halfway mark, that tells us we're probably not going to make it to the landing pattern entry point, and we probably need to select an alternate landing area. So really, the concept is to divide the distance that you need to travel in half, and then see how much altitude you lose in the first half. And you're probably going to lose roughly the same amount of altitude traveling the second half. On your next jump, again, work with your instructor to come up with the landing pattern for your jump, or maybe even determine. So really, the concept is to divide the distance that you need to travel in half, and then see how much altitude you lose in the first half. And you're probably going to lose roughly the same amount of altitude traveling the second half.